That I will play poker with over the telephone. 1864. We were the youngest state in the youngest nation in the world. Woo! The gold rush was over. The silver rush was on. And those in the East who were tired of over-civilization looked west to Nevada. 1864, we were a wild, free, disorderly society of unspeakably happy men. And some of the hardiest women you ever saw. You might be wondering how Mark Twain got all the way from the Mississippi River to Nevada. I'm going to tell you, if I can remember. I was piloting on the river when we first learned that South Carolina had gone out of the Union. This was in December of 1860. And by the summer of '61, the first wash of the wave of war broke upon the shores of Missouri. I took the last boat up out of New Orleans after the fall of Fort Sumter. Well, 15 of us gathered together in a secret place by night and formed ourselves into a military company, the Marion Rangers. I was made the second lieutenant. We had no first lieutenant, I don't know why. Marion County ranchers and farmers were kind enough to loan us horses for the duration of the war, which they judged would be 3 months. The creature that fell to my share was a very small and active mule. So active it could throw me every time I climbed on it, and it did that too. And then it would bray and spread its jaws so you could see down to its works. It was a disagreeable animal in every way. And if I took it by the bridle and tried to lead it off the grounds, it would sit down and brace back and nobody could budge it. But I was not entirely destitute as to military resources, no. There was a well over by the corn crib. So I substituted 30 fathoms of rope for the bridle and fetched him home with the windlass. Well, the Marion Rangers, we learned more about retreating than the man who invented retreating. I was incapacitated from retreating. And in that little time, that 2 weeks, the desire to kill people to whom I had not been introduced had passed away. So I seceded from the secession. Well, the ironical fact is I was missing in action before a shot was fired. Some said I was too irregular, even for the irregulars. There's a tune I remember. Well, but as good luck would have it, my brother Orion had been appointed secretary to Territorial Governor Nye, out in the Silverland, Nevada. So I fancied myself to be secretary to the secretary, and I purchased the $150 each on the Overland stagecoach out of St. Joe, and out we came at a spanking game with our 6-shooters, a deck of cards, and a 6-pound unabridged Webster's dictionary. Should have left it behind. Wasn't a good dictionary, didn't have any modern words in it, only obsolete words that Noah Webster used when he was a child. Well, for example, it defined a carbuncle as a kind of a rare jewel. No, humor has no place in a dictionary. And every time we avalanche from one side of that stagecoach to the other, the dictionary came behind, and every time it came, it damaged somebody. Oh, the first trip across it barked Orin's elbow. Next time it came, it hurt me in the stomach area. And the third trip, it bent old Mr. Bemis's nose up to where he could look down his nostrils. No, I don't believe the dictionary has been any benevolence to society. It's a pretty uncreative mind that cannot find more than one way to spell a word. Don't you think? Upon arriving at our first way station, I noticed the tablecloths and napkins had not arrived. And they were not looking for them either. Our breakfast sat before us, slumgullion, but our teeth were idle. Long about an hour after breakfast, we saw our first coyote. The coyote is a living, breathing allegory of want. He is always hungry, always poor, out of luck and friendless. A flea would desert him for a bicycle. He's so spiritless and cowardly that even while his exposed teeth are pretending a threat, the rest of his face is apologizing for it. But if you set a swift-footed dog after him, you'll enjoy it ever so much, especially if it is a dog that has a good opinion of himself and has been brought up to think he knows something about speed. You see, the coyote will go swinging gently off on that deceitful trot of his, and every little while will smile a thoughtful smile over his shoulder that will fill that dog entirely full of encouragement and worldly ambition. Yes, and cause him to throw his heart into his heels. And yet for the soul of him, he cannot understand why it is he cannot get perceptibly closer. It makes him madder and madder to see how gently the coyote glides along and never pants or sweats or ceases to smile. And he grows more and more incensed to see how shamefully he's been taken in by an entire stranger. And what an ignoble swindle that long, calm, soft-footed trot is. And next he notices he's beginning to get fagged, and that the coyote has to slacken speed a little to keep from running away from him. Then that little town dog is mad in earnest. He begins to strain and weep and swear and paw the sand even higher. And then in the instant that a wild new hope is lighting up his face, the coyote turns and smiles blandly upon him, as if to say, "Well, I must tear myself away from you, bub. Business is business." And forthwith there's a rushing sound and the sudden splitting of a long crack through the atmosphere. And behold, that dog is alone in the midst of a vast solitude. And for as long as a year after that, whenever there's a great cry of "Coyote!" that dog will merely glance in that direction without emotion, and apparently observe to himself, "I don't believe I want any of that pie." By and by we reach the home of the Latter-day Saints, stronghold of the prophets, capital of the only absolute monarchy in America, Great Salt Lake City. Oh, this was a healthy place. They had but one physician, and he was held under arrest to answer the Vagrancy Act for having no visible means of support. Well, he had one patient while we were there. guess he had two. One was a horse. The other was a sailor. He asked him, "What's the matter with you?" He said, "I don't know, but I'm a sailor." So he treated him for that. I've never seen a man die a more peaceful death. We had but 2 days in Salt Lake, so there was not time to mount the Inquisition and bring to the attention of the nation the workings of polygamy. Oh, I had the will to do so. Yes, I was feverish to plunge in here headlong and bring about a reform until I saw the Mormon women. And I realized that the man who married one of them had done an act of Christian charity. The man who married 60 of them had done a deed of such generosity that all the nations should worship him inside. Old Brigham Young had 110 children in the house. Friends stopped by the house one day and one of the children a tin whistle. Brigham had to rush out and purchase 109 more. Then the adults were confined to talking on the fingers entirely until the children grew weary of the whistles. And the bedroom. Imagine all 72 of those wives snoring at the same time, while the roar was deafening. And the danger of it. For if they were all to draw their breath in at once, you could actually see the walls of the building suck in. No 10 or 11 wives is sufficient. Never take more. Before leaving Salt Lake, I was asked by a Mormon elder, and he said, "Well, Clemens, I reckon you cannot cite one passage in the good book that disallows polygamy." But that was easy. No man can serve two masters. Now, I have to say, at the footnote, all the Mormon women look like the King family or Marie Osmond. You know, they're all beautiful, even the ladies running the Mormon station here. I was going to pay my respects before I talk about the Mormons. We love the Mormons here. And down in Las Vegas, too. You know that Mormon fort down there. It's the earliest history in Nevada. I go down there every Nevada day and get run out. About 20 days on the Overland, if you can imagine. Once we heard the thunder of hooves push back the flat, and there was the Pony Express galloping past like a belated fragment of a storm. And so sudden was it all, and so like a flash of unreal fancy, that were it not for the fleck of white foam left quivering and perishing on the mail sack, we might have been left in doubt as to whether we saw a pony and a rider at all. They were so fast. But imagine with me, if you will, we would climb up on top of the box at dawn in our long johns, smoke our pipes and cigars, and watch the sunrise on the prairie. Even to this day, it thrills me to think of the wild sense of freedom that used to make the blood dance in our veins on those fine overland mornings. And at last, we disembarked in the Silver Land. This was in August of 1861. And back then, I have to tell you, Carson City was the most uninhabitable place on earth. Nothing grew there. Even the birds, when they flew over, carried their own provisions. But we climbed into the foothills and looked back on Carson, nestled in that flat sandy desert, and surrounded by such prodigious mountains that they seemed to expand your soul, until you felt yourself spreading into a colossus. And in that instant you were seized with a burning desire to stretch forth your hand, put Carson in your pocket, and walk off with it. It was beautiful, really. In exploring the Sink, we traveled down the Carson River west. When one is accustomed to the monstrous mile-wide Mississippi, he grows accustomed to associating the word river with a certain degree of watery grandeur. So when one stands on the shores of the Carson, he's disappointed. Oh, one of the most vigorous forms of exercise one can contrive is to run and jump across the Carson until he's overheated, and then get down and drink it dry. No, it's a moist ditch. If it were my river, I wouldn't leave it out of doors at night. And I could see I was going to need some transportation while in Carson City, so I attended an auction and bought a genuine Mexican plug. Well, I didn't know what a genuine Mexican plug was, really, but I bought it on the advice of a man I later found out was the auctioneer's brother. Well, his tail had been chopped off, or he sat down on it wrong at one time or t'other, but anyways, he was proud of it. But this left him only his heels with which to fight off the flies. Well, with some help of some others, some holding his head and some his tail, I was able to climb onto that steed. But my feet slipped through the stirrups on the inside, so I was handcuffed at the ankles. And he knew it. So he put his feet together. All of that. Lowered his back and fired me 5 feet into the air. And somebody shouted out, "Oh, don't he buck!" Well, I came back down on the saddle. But the laughter this provoked, he took for applause. Fired me up again. This time I came down on the high pommel, which was too much variety for me. So I decided to get off. But now he was standing straight up on his hind legs, walking around like a member of Congress. You might think I was afraid, but I wasn't. I knew I could stay on him, so long as his ears did not pull out. Suddenly I was in the air again, and when I came down, that genuine Mexican plug was gone. So I dug myself out of the ground and made up my mind that if that auctioneer's brother's funeral was held while I was in Carson City, I would cancel all other recreations and attend it. I tried my hand at prospecting, yes, but I didn't have any luck. I sooner enough discovered a silver mine worth nothing but a hole in the ground with a fool at the bottom and a liar at the top. But all the talk was Esmeralda, Aurora. So off we went, 6 men, a mule, a wagon, and 1,500 pounds of supplies. And after a few hours, we found we could make better time if we got out of the wagon. And sometime later, we found we could do better yet if we got behind the wagon and pushed it. Then some folks coming back from Esmeralda, they took a look at our situation. They suggested we might do even better yet if we put the mule in the wagon. It was the coldest winter, that bitter winter of 1861. It was so cold you could not speak the truth. Well, I know because I tried. It was so cold we carried our brandy punches around in our pockets and ate them like peanuts. Well, the bartender just rolled them up in butcher paper and lobbed them off for us. I was shoveling quartz tailings. A mess of it struck a ledge, came down my neck and inside my clothes. Well, I didn't say a word. I climbed out of that hole and silently resolved that I'd starve before I'd ever shoot rubbish at myself again with a long-handled shovel. So I retired from that industry, not only with my own approval, but with the approval of those who paid the wages. They did not feel justified in paying me to shovel sand down my back. So I went out to Mono Lake, about 200 feet deep. But Mono Lake is very strong with alkali. You can drag your shirt behind the boat for 5 minutes, it will stay clean for a week. You just pound it with a rock. Gives your shirt a nice handsome fringe around the collar. We were out pleasure boating on Mono one day with our dog. He was a very valuable dog, but he had a few raw places. He had more raw places than he had sound ones. He was the rawest dog I ever saw, and he jumped overboard to get away from the flies. Bad judgment. He struck out for shore with considerable interest, barking all the way, until by the time he reached the shore, there was no bark left in him or on the outside either, for that matter. And then he took to throwing somersaults on the beach, some forwards, some backwards, and dragging himself across the sand in a sitting posture. This was not a demonstrative dog. He was rather grave-minded. I never saw him take such an interest in anything before. And then he struck out for the mountains at a gait we estimated to be 175 miles an hour. And we're looking for him yet. No, if you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, he will not bite you. This is the principal difference between a dog and a man. Well, I didn't have any luck in the mining fields, no. I did one thing right, though. I wrote a letter to the editor of the Territorial Enterprise in Virginia City about my adventures in the mining fields. In fact, it was a burlesque of a 4th of July speech that George Turner made. He was our Chief Justice, and he was out stumping the territory. And his speech began, "I was sired by the great American eagle." We'll draw a curtain of charity over the rest of the speech. And I concluded my article by stating, I cannot complete this essay, for the typecases will have run out of capital I. And I called that little squid Professor Personal Pronoun. And I signed it, Josh. Yes, Josh. I was looking for a nom de guerre, cognomen. Once before, I had used E. Panamondus Atrastus Blab. So sometime later, I took Thomas Jefferson Snodgrass. But on the strength of that letter, signed Josh, I was offered a job as a reporter. And Joe Goodman, the publisher, told me when I signed on, he said, "Sam, you have but one responsibility here. Get your facts straight. Then you can distort them as much as you like." So we never let the truth stand in the way of a good story back then. I learned in Virginia City a good lie can travel twice around the globe before the truth gets its boots on. Isn't that so? Still today. Well, Virginia City was the richest place on earth back then. 52 saloons we had in that town in my day. And no town drunk. No, we took turns. Well, I could see that this was no place for a good Presbyterian. So I didn't remain one very long. But we had fun. I remember attending a ball over in Gold Hill in the ramshackle, dismal old Barnable place, with lighted from end to end with tallow candle chandeliers made out of barrel hoops suspended from the ceiling. The grease dripped all over us. There were 200 or 300 stalwart men present, dancing with cordial energy, half of them representing women. Yes, each with a handkerchief tied around his left arm to distinguish him from the men. I was a lady myself. I wore a revolver in my belt. So did all of the other ladies. Nevada truly was battle born. One night I had an occasion to play the piano. My sister Pamela taught me one song on the piano. It's called "I Had an Old Horse, His Name Was Methuselah." Can I play it for you? Is Dave born in the house? He'll never know. He's a real musician, you know. This is his piano here. So don't let it out that I played this thing. Yesterday, Dave was here and I played that song. I was so embarrassed. Because when I looked at him, tears were running down his face. I said, Dave, you must love horses. He said, no, I'm a musician. I got a letter from Cal Hickory the other day that said, Sam, those who criticize your writing never saw you dance. You ain't my piano bad. Well, I covered the legislature for the Enterprise, and in all these years, nothing has changed. Never have I seen a body of men with tongues so handy and information so uncertain. Well, they could talk for a week without ever getting rid of an idea. If any one of them had been on hand when the Creator was at the point of saying, let there be light, we never would have got it. No, the Nevada legislature meets every 2 years for 60 days, when they ought rightly meet every 60 years for 2 days. When the Nevada legislature is in session, nobody is safe. Isn't it interesting? Thomas Jefferson predicted our American society would last 1,000 years. This titan of reason was only off by 800. As in the rush for gold, we would lose our economic virginity. 1849, California got the best in the world, the hardiest people. And 10 years later, we would get the best of that best in the rush for silver. And some of those best are still with us today, right here in this building, a few generations on. And here we are celebrating our 150th birthday. Isn't this something? Wow. Well, Virginia City would produce over 100 millionaires in a very short period of time. And two of the most colorful of those first 100 millionaires were the very first two. The first female millionaire in these parts was of Scottish descent, Eileen Orme. She ran a boarding house in Virginia City. One of her boarders would become our first male millionaire, Sandy Bowers, a miraculously ignorant Missouri mule skinner. Who had as good a heart as ever any boy had. Sandy was working the overmine but not having any luck. So he went to Ivy and asked if she wouldn't take a foot of his ledge for payment. She obliged. And again the next month, and the month after. Truth was, Ivy had a bit of a crush on Sandy. Well, when Sandy's ledge came home to signal the richest ore strike in history, he went back to his room and with a lead pencil figured what Ivy was worth from her shares of the ledge. When he saw the figure, he walked into the kitchen, got down on one knee, and proposed to her. Yes, and together they became our first millionaires. Built a beautiful mansion over here. Well, I'll show you, can still go through it today. 1869, the railroad came through and changed things dramatically in Nevada. Charles Crocker wanted nothing more than for Lakes Crossing to grow. He offered $50 to the parents of the first baby born there. And he decided Lakes Crossing needed a more exciting name. So Crocker put the names of several Civil War heroes into a hat and drew out, guess who? Steve Teixeira. No. Hi, Steve. Jesse Reno, whose name had been anglicized from Renault. Had it not been anglicized, I suppose I'd be speaking French up here today. So Reno was destined to become the biggest little city in the world. But it didn't happen overnight, no. Nevada fell on hard times at the end of the 19th century. Our minds had all played out. We were broke. The population dropped to 40,000 people. And there was talk in Congress of revoking Nevada's statehood until California came to the rescue. unwittingly. And in one short weekend, we would go from a broken state of mining to an exciting new state of attractions. Here's how it happened. California promoted a heavyweight prize fight between our champion, gentleman Jim Corbett, and the champion of England and Australia, fighting Bobby Fitzsimmons. The bout was scheduled for St. Patrick's Day. Both boys were Irish. But for some reason, California decided prize fighting was not a gentleman's sport and canceled the draw. Overnight, Nevada legislators seized the opportunity and legalized prize fighting. They welcomed that draw to Carson City and kept the date, St. Patrick's Day, 1897. Well, 4,000 people crossed the High Sierra to see that fight. Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp were hired as bouncers. As the bell rang for the 14th round, Fitzsimmons' wife could be heard shouting from the front row, "Hit him in the slats, Bob! Hit him in the slats!" Well, he did. Fitzsimmons won that bout with his famous solar plexus blow, which some said was too low. But then Corbett always wore his trunks hiked up so high. Who was to know? Well, when the folks in Carson City added up all the money that was left behind, they had to ask themselves, if 4,000 people will cross the High Sierra to see one fight, how many more will come to spin the French wheel, get married, get divorced, visit a brothel? So, Nevada's romance with disrespectability began with the Corbett Fitzsimmons fight. And everything we see around us today, from these casinos here in North Nevada to volcanoes erupting in southern Nevada, are all a direct result of that fight. The battle cry of 20th century Nevada became, "Give us laws that give us liberty." 1910, Nevada put an exclamation mark on the state of attractions with the fight of the 20th century, Jack Johnson, Jim Jeffries in Reno. Anybody remember who won that fight? I'm the only one old enough to remember. Jack Johnson. 600 reporters covered that fight. When they filed their stories with Western Union, they set a record that would last 17 years. 1 million words in one day. Not until Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic Ocean did that record get broken in 1927. But we were not happy yet, no. We wanted to become the first to legalize gambling. And that's exactly what happened. 1931, we legalized gambling and offered a short 6-week residency to get a divorce. Mary Bickford divorced Douglas Fairbanks in Reno. Then the rush was on. One Californian was quick to comment, "You got to get married, go do it in Nevada, and do it early in the morning. That way, if it don't work out, it won't ruin your whole day." You might be wondering, how does Mark Twain know about Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks anyway? Well, for a very good reason. The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. So what was that wealthy New York lady going to do in Reno for 6 weeks while waiting for a divorce? Never at a loss, Nevada accommodated these ladies with dude ranches. But gambling stayed in the back rooms even after legalization, until Pappy Smith rolled it out into the front parlor of Harold's Club in Reno with mouse roulette to attract the non-gambler, the woman. Mouse roulette was a spinning cage with a live mouse inside. If the mouse rested on your number, you won. The ladies thought it was cute and loved to bet on the little mouse. Sometimes the spinning cage took longer to stop than the mouse and chopped off the mouse's tail, which was not popular with the ladies. But taken all around, mouse roulette was a huge attraction. Pappy would walk the floor, cajole the players, and give losers a free meal and a bus ride home. When was the last time you had that offering? Men in uniform drank free. And we'd like to take this moment to thank our men in uniform and our women in uniform and our veterans for your service. motto, Harold's Club or Bust. Designed the way billboards made no mention of gambling, they didn't have to. 6 years after we legalized gambling, a small-time bingo owner from the West Coast arrived in Reno. He was a car guy, a free liver, a roistering, dissolute fellow, who would eventually give up the booze to become Nevada's biggest gambler, Bill Harrah. 1937, Harrah built a small bingo parlor right next to Pappy Smith's place. The first thing Bill did was to lay carpet down in this parlor. Everybody laughed, especially Pappy. Bill, these cowboys are just going to truck mud in here in your carpet. You're going to have one heck of a mess. But a strange thing happened. Cowboys started coming around these mountains with ladies on their arms, and they stopped at the front door of Harrah's to wipe their feet. Bill Harrah introduced a new clientele to the gambling hall. He hired the best entertainment money could buy and treated those stars like royalty. Sammy Davis Jr. would say, I don't care where you stay. When you leave Harrah's, you're roughing it. Bill Crosby would give Bill Harrah for Christmas one year a Mercedes limousine, and he left a note on the windshield. What do you give a man who has 1,400 cars? Harrah enjoyed so much success that he went public, and Harrah's appeared on the New York Stock Exchange. By turning his casinos into corporations, Harrah was able to marginalize the mob. Before Bill Harrah, the mob pretty well had a handle on things. And that beautiful lake of ours was their burial ground. Oh yes, we got gangsters stacked up on the bottom of that lake like hardwood. Really, Jacques Cousteau's son came out, went down, took a look around. When he came back up, he said the world is not ready to know what's on the bottom of this lake. So we have Bill Harrah to thank for chasing the mob off, but one monster came back and gave Frank Sinatra some grief in the early 60s. Frank had purchased that property. In fact, he took possession of it on the very day that John Kennedy accepted the Democratic nomination for president. And one of Frank's friends, Sam Giancana, would deliver Chicago for Kennedy, and subsequently Illinois and the election. But Frank brought his other friends up here to have some fun. The Rat Pack. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, Angie Dickinson, Shirley MacLaine. They had some gaudy times. And that Frank Sinatra showroom was packed every night. One evening, Frank threw a party for Marilyn Monroe. Everybody came, including Sam Giancana. Now, Sam Giancana was in the Black Book. For those of you who don't live in Nevada, we have a list of unsavory mob types who try to keep out of the casinos. Sam was at the top of that list. Well, the next morning after Marilyn's party, Frank received a phone call from the chairman of the Gaming Control Board asking if, in fact, Giancana had been in his casino. Frank let loose like a cavalry charge with a liturgy of curses, which cost him his gambling license and earned him the Nevada moniker, Old Blue Mouth. That didn't keep Frank from entertaining. No, he went off to Las Vegas, took his friends with him, and they carried on down there. Did you know in Las Vegas the word book is a verb? I'll say that for our teacher friends on board and librarians. But we can bet on anything they can bet on down south, pretty much. We can bet on the national anthem up here on Super Sunday. We can. If the anthem goes longer than 2 minutes and 15 seconds and you have the over, you win. And the football contest hasn't even begun. This last year, maybe it was a year before, they picked a real popular girl to sing the national anthem. Keys, somebody help me out here. That's her, Alicia Keys. Well, a few of us suspected she might just torture that song for all it was worth. So we took the over. I don't know if you saw it or remember, but she did. She hit that last note about 2 minutes. We were cheering her on, and she held that note like a grudge. And of course, we get into the 2:30 zone. We were buying drinks for people we didn't know before the game even kicked off. It's fun up here, yes it is. It's a terrible death to be talked to death. I think that God is meant for us to talk more than listen, and He's given us 2 mouths and 1 ear, don't you? So I like to pause and give you a chance to ask me a question or two about the olden days. And if I don't have an answer, at least I have an opinion. The question doesn't have to be about the olden times. It can be about modern times. I've been around so long now, I know a little bit about everything. Yes, dear?
How were your adventures in Tahoe back before it was established back in the old days?
Yes, my adventures in Tahoe. You come up to Incline Village one day this summer and visit the Mark Twain Cultural Center. We'll spend all evening talking about Lake Tahoe. I'll just leave you with this thought. It's kind of something you might like to pursue. I mean, maybe you know already. Maybe you even live there. You just tossed me a softball. Thank you. But Lake Tahoe is the fairest picture the whole earth affords. It's the air that angels breathe. If Lake Tahoe does not cure whatever ails you, I'll bury you at my own expense. We love Lake Tahoe, don't we? Yes, sir.
When did you have your first drink in the bar across the street?
Oh, what a wonderful question, because I have to know the answer. She asked me when I had my first drink across the street in the oldest tavern in Nevada. I remember, first let me tell you this, last year, after my program here, I went in there, and there was a fellow sitting on a stool in there, looked like he'd been there since the war ended. And he shouted out, "Mark Twain, I read everything you ever wrote." I said, "Well, it makes my day to hear that. Which one was your favorite?" The bar got real quiet. And then he said, "Tequila Mockingbird." I said, no, that was Jose Cuervo. Don't you love that tavern? But no, the first time I went in there, they were still serving tarantula juice. This was back in 1861. Nobody knew all that went into the tarantula juice, but the last thing they did to it, to give it dignity, was to strain it through a cane-bottom chair. Well, to get the big lumps out. No, 2 tarantula juices would turn a man's skin to white fish scales. They were so tough a dog could bite them, and he wouldn't know it until he read about it in the paper. Brought on premature decrepitude. I love that old tavern. I'd be going over there right now in a couple of minutes and trying to Governor Sparks is going to be going across the street in the Masonic Temple, and I want to hear what he has to say. Plus, we've got a Kentucky Derby coming up at 3:30. Then I have to go to Reno and talk to the early trails folks. So I can't spend much time over there today. Yes, Sue.
Did you ever spend any time at David Wally's?
In where?
David Wally's at the hot springs.
Oh, David Wally's, yes. Now that will, those hot waters at Wally's, that'll cure the botch, the emerald, and the erysipelas. I've had them all. I love water. I love Nevada. We have everything, don't we? We do, from the hot water at Wally's to the coldest water I ever felt at Lake Tahoe. Yes, dear.
So I'm from Missouri as well, and I'm just curious, what do you miss most?
What do I miss most about Missouri? Well, the town I was raised in, Hannibal, was an ideal town for a boy to be brought up in, because families were strong, and they kind of kept an eye on us a little bit. I didn't attend school much. My father died when I was 11, so I had to go to work in the printing shop. So the printing shop became my high school, and the steamboat my university. So, in spite of it all, I got a pretty good education. I'm as unlettered as the backside of a tombstone. but I've gained worlds of knowledge secondhand, most of it in Missouri. It's a great place for kids. I can't speak about Missouri as an adult because when I came out here, I only went back to visit my mother. So I really don't know what it would have been like for an adult. But just comparing Hannibal to Virginia City today, in Hannibal, half of the people are dead and half of them are alive, and it takes an expert to tell them apart. Not so in Virginia City. You want an opinion, you go up Virginia City, you get an earful. But we love Missouri. Well, we'll take a couple more questions here and let you go. Glad to see some young people in here today. I work in the schools a good deal, travel around. I try to remind our young people, the man who does not read good books has no advantage over the man who cannot read them. So whenever you have a choice of two things to read, let's say between a good book and a tabloid, try to remember that quote from your old friend Mark Twain, if you will. Just this morning, on the way down here from the lake, I stopped for coffee. I looked up and read the headline on a tabloid, and it read, "Woman pigs out on 5 gallons of Haagen-Dazs and freezes to death." You read a tabloid, it's like eating cotton candy for dinner. You have nothing to build on. But you read a good book, you have ideals, and that good book can bring out your best instincts, and good things can happen for you when you read good books. One last question. Yes, sir.
What do you think of Mr. Lincoln?
Mr. Lincoln. I'll make this a short answer. I could go on, of course. The best compliment I ever had came from William Dean Howells. He was editor of The Atlantic and a good author in his own right. And after I had been promoted to glory, he said, "Mark Twain was the Lincoln of our literature." Deserve that. You can cut that off the film you're shooting over there. I don't deserve that compliment, but there's nobody like Abraham Lincoln. I would just like to, on behalf of Lieutenant Governor Krolicki and the Sesquicentennial Commission, thank the great town of Genoa and our wonderful people here, Sue and Bonnie, and all these 200 volunteers that make this weekend just come alive with our Cowboy Festival. Thank you for having us.
nothing to do in the morning, nothing to do at night, nothing to do, but I can do nothing alright. Got nothing to say to nobody, nobody says nothing to me. Nothing to say, nothing to say. Don't you know that nothing is free? Nothing is free, nothing is free. Nothing is free, I think I can solve. Nothing is free, nothing is free. I guess that's why I've got so much of nothing. Nothing to do with my baby. My baby does nothing back. Nothing to do, nothing to prove. I like nothing and that's a fact. 'Cause nothing is free, nothing is free. Nothing is free, I think I can solve. Nothing is free, nothing is free. I guess that's why I've got so much of nothing. Nothing I got gets me loaded. Nothing I got gets me high. Nothing I got, nothing got nothing to get me by. 'Cause nothing is free, nothing is free. Nothing is free, I think I can solve. Nothing is free, nothing is free. I guess that's why I've got so much of nothing. Nothing is free, I think I can solve. Nothing is free, nothing is free. I guess that's why I've got so much of nothing. 'Cause nothing is free, nothing is free. Nothing is free, I think I can solve. Nothing is free, nothing is free. I guess that's why I've got so much of nothing. So much of nothing. I'm gonna get some more of nothing. I'm just the queen of nothing.